Good afternoon, and welcome to All Things Podcast SA. Thank you to all those who have subscribed to the channel. The channel has grown. Well, I've been asked to clarify some few things on our previous video about VUYO ZUNGULA, the ATM, changing their president of VUYO ZUNGULA, removing him as the president of the party. So, well, here am I thinking on that. I had said that Uvio Zungula, it's a great leader, very great leader. There's no you can you, there's nothing that I can blame on Uvio Zungula. He's been running that thing perfectly. He's been pushing progressive policies, progressive things in parliament. He's the one who dealt with the the dollars on the mattress. It was Vio Zungula who took that. We have the Section 89 commission. Is it a commission or what? Section 89. Yeah, that thing. It was Vio Zungula. So Vio Zungula is a great leader. And when I talked about Vio Zungula and ATM and the church, here's the thinking. Here's where we're coming from. The question was, is it okay for the church to be involved in politics? Is it okay for a church to be involved in politics? And my answer was that it is not good for a church to be involved in politics because previously, history tells us that whenever church was involved in politics, people who were not in line with that church were persecuted by the church using the state. In other words, once the church has state power, or once the church has control over the things that the church wants to do, and when people don't rally behind what the church wants to do, the church then uses the state to enforce its desires. And I give an example of the papacy, that the papacy during its reign from 538 AD to 1798, you understand, it persecuted people or Christians who refused to worship on Sunday. We know from the Bible that the day of worship is the seventh day, which is called the Sabbath. In today's time, Sabbath is Saturday, the seventh day of the week. So the papacy changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. And everyone who did not follow that was then persecuted. People had to flee, flee their homes and go to the wilderness. They were persecuted, tortured, killed, because now the church had control over the state. And that, you can check your history. Papacy did that. The papacy did that. And if you wonder what is papacy, papacy is the office of the Pope, and the Pope is a leader of a particular church. So it's a system. It's not an individual. It's a system. Whenever this church has control over the state, a lot of things are going to happen. And then I even said we can go back to biblical times. You had Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who said, no one is going to, everyone must bow down to the image that I've set up. If you don't bow down to the image that I've set up, you will be thrown into the fiery furnace. And that's where you have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fire. Why? It was because the state and church were combined. And whenever church and states are combined, there is persecution to those who do not want to worship according to what the state is saying. And we said again, it repeated in Daniel's time. They said no one is to worship any other deity other than the king. So for 30 days, everyone had to worship King Darius. And Daniel said, I'm not going to worship King Darius. And what happened to Daniel? There was a law that was made, and the law required that anyone who was found worshiping any other god other than Darius the king, that person was to be thrown into the lion's den. And that's what happened to Daniel. He was thrown into the lion's den. Why? Because church and state were united. And you can go throughout history, throughout the Bible, and look where church and state were combined. There is always persecution of those who refuse to worship according to that church. So because that church has a muscle, has a state, and then it will use the state to persecute. You remember Jezebel? Jezebel, when he wanted to pursue Elijah. Jezebel was just a queen, and woman. But because she was married to Ahab, king of Israel, then Ahab using that state power to persecute, you understand? So that's what I'm saying. I am not saying that ATM will become the power in South Africa, because, well, chances for that are very slim. I'm simply saying to you, whenever church and state are united, expect persecution. Whenever church and state are united, expect persecution, because a church wants to move a certain way, and everyone who does not want to move along those lines, that church will use the state to make a law and punish everyone who does not follow that law. You understand? Because the church does not have prisons. The church does not have power to persecute. The church cannot take you on trial. The church cannot arrest you. But because the church now controls the state, the church will say to the state, "State, please, we want you to make this law," and the state, influenced by the church, will make certain laws, and the church will use those laws, you know, to persecute or to punish or to force everyone to follow uh, that law. So this is what we're saying, that a church should not be involved in politics, which means even if you're a pastor, you should not be involved in politics. You cannot be a politician as a pastor. You cannot be a politician as a pastor. I mean, really, you really cannot be a politician. You will compromise your religion. Yes, you can comment on what is happening in politics, like I'm commenting now, what's happening in politics, what's happening there and there, what is happening there and there. But you cannot be a politician, because these two, faith and politics, they don't work. So that's what I was saying. And I thank you all for your comments, and thank you all for following the channel. I am so happy that you guys are engaging, you guys are talking. Remember, if you have not subscribed, please don't wait, do that now. See you in the next one.